guys doing? I love this. I started the recording. Yeah, that's why I wanted to ask. Hello YouTube as well. How you guys doing? There's like 2 people that watch on YouTube as well. So, well, not right now, but like when it gets uploaded. Thank you for watching, by the way. I really appreciate it. They can see my face. Yeah. I got my face on the corner over here. So I know you are not one of the people that watch my videos. To be fair, you come to these sessions, so it's okay. Like you have an excuse. Exactly. You guys are the better people. I'm sorry, YouTube people, but these guys are better. All right, we'll get started. We'll get started. Today, as you guys know, we're doing a beginner lesson. Okay, we're doing a beginner lesson. You guys have messed me up today. Okay, what's going on? Welcome back to Beginner Chess. I mean, you already know who I am. You guys have come here like literally every week. Yeah, I'm Naranjan Kumar. I'm the Wellbeing Officer for Chess Society. And today we're going to talk about how to evaluate a position. So, the last week's beginner lesson we talked about prophylaxis in chess, which is basically like asking yourself what your opponent can do and then trying to stop your opponent from doing those moves. And that was like a series of like middle games kind of thing. So I remember a chess game is split into 3 sections: the opening, the middle game, and the end game. And so the one that I did on prophylaxis was a middle game lesson, and evaluating position, so the one that we're doing today, is also a middle game lesson. Hello. And basically, I've got some learning objectives for you guys. After the lesson, you should be able to know the criteria needed to evaluate a chess position. So all of these 5 criteria over here. And essentially, we're going to figure out how to apply these to real chess positions. You guys already know the drill. I'm going to split the session into 2 halves. First half is all theory. Second half, you guys get to play each other. So you've all come here many, many times. So you know the drill. So first of all, what actually is evaluation? But before that, have you ever played a chess game and been one of these kings and thought to yourself, what is going on? Who's winning? Like, who's winning? Am I winning? Are you winning? What's going on? Like, a lot of people have had these thoughts, and it's very common in beginners to not really know who's winning. And that's what today's session is all about. Basically trying to figure out, looking at a chess position, going through a sort of like a criteria of 5 things pretty much, and trying to figure out if you're winning or if I'm winning or if it's a draw pretty much. And you're in the right place if you thought that, if you've been in one of these situations. So actually evaluation, in chess players use what's called a point system. And essentially like this point system is based on the value of each piece. So a pawn is worth 1 point, a knight and bishop are worth 3 points, the rook is worth 5 points, the queen is worth 9 points, and the king is worth infinite, because if you lose the king, you lose the game. If you lose a queen, you still lose a queen, but you still carry on the game. And I'm going to show you that a bit later as well. But, hello. But basically, we use this point system in chess to evaluate if white is winning or black is winning, or if it's a draw pretty much. So a score of +1 means that white has about an extra pawn on the board. It doesn't mean that they have an extra pawn on the board, it just means that they have a position that's equal to having an extra pawn, pretty much. And if the numbers are decimal, so something like +0.6 or +0.8, that means that one of the sides has a little bit of an advantage, so ever so slightly better, but they're nowhere near winning yet. So they've got a small advantage, but it's not like incredible. It's not an incredible advantage, pretty much. But if the number is a bit bigger, so if it's ±3, for example, then that means that one of the players, so if it's plus, that means black is under pressure. If it's minus, then that means white is under pressure. So plus means that white is winning. So +3 means white is +3, they're winning. Whereas if it's -3, then that means black is basically under severe, white is under severe pressure, and black has the advantage pretty much. Yeah?
Is this for like online chess? Like how would you
Anything. I'll get onto that as well. So, computers. Basically, the easiest way to figure out if your position is winning or losing is to check it with a chess engine. So, putting your game into a computer, putting it online, and then running it through a chess engine. So, Stockfish, for example, that's one of the main chess engines out there. And basically, it gives you this number, like any kind of number, pretty much. And so we've got this -5.3 example here, which means that black has a significant advantage. They have an advantage they basically have an extra rook, or similar kind of advantage of a rook, pretty much. But as you guys know, like, if you use a computer if you're playing over the board, or if you're playing online or whatever it is, and then you get some help from a computer, that's not great. Like, it's considered cheating. And if you're playing on chess.com or Lichess or whatever chess website there is, you're going to get banned because it's pretty obvious that you're cheating. And please don't cheat. Like, it's not good. It's not a good look. So, how do we actually determine this number if we're playing as a human? Like, you guys are going to be playing over the boards today in today's session. So how do you get that number if you're not putting your moves to a computer? How do you figure out who's winning, who's losing, and how do you get this number in your head? And that's what the 5 criteria. That's what we're gonna try and figure out today. And basically, the 5 criteria is sort of like a checklist that helps us identify that number, pretty much, to determine who's winning or who's losing. And part of the 5 criteria is material, we've got king safety, we've got piece activity, we've got space advantage, and we've got tactics. And basically, I'm gonna give you guys a position, and I'm gonna walk you through each of the 5 criteria, trying to look at what my thought process was behind each of these criteria, and sort of guess what the evaluation is, pretty much. So actually, the position that I'm going to show you today is one of the games I played quite recently, and I actually haven't looked at what the evaluation is, so I have no idea what the number is. When I was making these lessons, I sort of thought, I'm going to write down what my thought process was behind trying to figure out how the 5 criteria can be implemented into these games. And I've got like a little bit of like text that tells you what my thought process was. So hopefully that can like help you with implementing it into your own games as well, trying to recreate that thought process. So without further ado, let's get into it. First of all is material. So what does material actually mean, right? Material is basically all the pieces on the boards. Whoever has more pieces on the boards is doing better, pretty much. They have the advantage. And so I mentioned before, like, I was going to show you this. So the king is the most important piece because he has infinite value, because the king is most important. If the king gets taken, you lose the game. Whereas if you lose a queen, for example, you lose 9 points of material, so the queen's worth 9 points of material, but the game still goes on. So the king is more important than the queen in chess. The rook's worth 5 points of material, the bishops are worth 3 points, the knights are also worth 3 points, and the pawns are worth 1 point. So technically, you can kind of look at it as a knight is worth 3 pawns, kind of. A bishop is worth 3 pawns, a rook is worth 5 pawns, but again, like, you can just say that a rook is worth 5 points, and you can call it a day, pretty much. And so how do we actually use this in the evaluation? So that number that I gave you, let's say if you hang your queen, for example, like you've just given it away completely for free, and you're playing as white, you've given 9 points of material to your opponent, which means that your opponent, just on material alone, is up 9 points of material. So -9 if black takes the queen, pretty much. So it would be -9. Whereas if, for example, I don't know, if I'm playing as white and I sacrifice my rook for a bishop, okay, so I'm down 5 points of material, so black is up 5 points of material, so it'd be -5, but I've gained a bishop for that, and the bishop is worth 3 points of material. So even though I've lost 5 points of material, I've also gained 3 points of material, so I'd still be losing because the rook's more important than the bishop, but the advantage for black wouldn't be as much if I just lost the rook on its own. It's pretty self-explanatory, right? Does that make sense? So the actual advantage for black would be -2, because -5 plus 3 is -2, and that would be the -2 advantage for black, pretty much. And that's one of the ways that a computer calculates that number, so that -5.3, whatever I showed you, that's one of the ways that a computer calculates it. And so I've got the example over here. This is from a game that I played a couple of days ago. I want you guys to look at this position, and I want you to count how much material each side has. So first of all, how many pawns does each side have? Hello. So how many pawns does white have right now? Yep. 7. Black has 8. So who has the advantage in terms of pawns? Black, yeah. By how much? 1 point. Okay. Let's look at the minor pieces. So it'd be -1 because black has the extra pawn. So minus means that black is better. Yeah. So let's look at the minor pieces then. So the knights and the bishops and the rooks, for example. Who has the advantage in terms of the minor pieces? Yeah, white is up a bishop. So let's look at it here. I realize I can actually draw on this, so I'm going to do that for today's session. So this knight and this knight cancel each other out. They're the same. This queen and this queen, they cancel each other out as well. This rook cancel each other out. These two cancel each other out. And we have this bishop left on the board. So we have, if we're playing as white, we have the advantage of the bishop. And how much was the bishop again? 3 points. So we've noticed that white has the extra bishop for a pawn, pretty much. White has the extra bishop on c4, but black has an extra pawn. So black has 8 pawns compared to our 7. So if white has one more bishop and white has one less pawn than black, just out of material alone, what do you think the evaluation is for this position? +2 for white, exactly. So +3 - 1 equals +2. Does that make sense so far? Pretty simplistic, right? 3 - 1 is 2. But obviously, I had 5 parts of the checklist, and material was only one of them. The computer uses all 5 of them, and a lot more than those criteria. So obviously, there's more to it than just material. You've obviously got to consider everything else that's going on the board. So we'll keep going with the checklist, but just off material alone, white is doing better because of this extra bishop. Even though they're down 1 pawn, this bishop is more important than it. So again, it's +2 of material compared to black. Did that make sense, by the way? It's pretty simplistic, right? And the next part of the criteria was king safety. Does anyone know what king safety means, first of all? Perfect. Yeah, exactly. So how well defended the king is, pretty much. But there's also another aspect of that, which I'm going to mention as well. So not only is it about how defended your king is, or your opponent's king is, it's if there's a feasible attack on the opponent king or your king as well. So if I thought of this analogy like a couple I was sitting outside trying to look over the slides. I had this analogy. Basically, if you're at home and you're sitting at home doing whatever, you think you're safe, right? You're at home, so you think you're safe. But what if there's a nuclear missile that lands on your head? Like, even though you've got a house above your heads, you're not really that safe, to be honest, right? So even though you might have a lot of pieces defending, or pawns defending your king. If there's a big attack coming to your king, then you're not really that safe, I suppose. And it's the same thing with the king safety. Yeah, so let's look at this position again. It's the same position. Which side's king is more safer? And is there any attacks on the enemy king or our king?
Black is safer because it's surrounded by pawn.
Okay,
In terms of us attacking, or white attacking black, or black attacking white?
either.
Actually, no, they're perfect yet. So thankfully, black's king to the slot. Oh wait, no, it would get equal. We would save the king for the black is more protecting her.
Okay. So that answers part of the question. So you think that black's king is safer because of this rook over here in the corner. Again, I can draw it. And they've got these three pawns defending the king, right?
Right.
But what about this part of the question? Is there a feasible attack? Is there an attack on either sides of the king?
Kind of.
You think so?
Queen can kind of attack the white king, but like the rook and the other queen are together really.
Yeah. Okay.
What, wait, didn't the queen eat our pawn and then move down to our king and check?
It can, but I'll get onto that a bit later as well. So I'm going to talk about that later. So you've mentioned that, I'll get rid of this. You've mentioned that actually,
I love that every time we come to class, you learn a new
yeah, exactly. I love that as well, yeah. So we've mentioned that black has these three pawns and the rook defending the king. And white's king is kind of not great, but if you kind of look at it for a bit longer, and you think of this question, is there a feasible attack on our king? You start to realize that actually, no, there's not really an attack. I mean, it's white to play right now, so you mentioned that this pawn is under attack as well, but we can just play king h2 and defend the pawn, and there's not really an attack left for black on our king, so he's kind of safe, to be honest. And actually, I thought that both kings are kind of similarly safe. I put a little asterisk over here, and I can show you why afterwards. And this is the thought process that I had when I first looked at this position, and I can read it out to you as well. So I thought that white's king white's king has the g2 rook defending him. So this g2 rook over here is defending the king, and actually black has no feasible way of attacking this king. I forgot to mention about this this h3 pawn being taken by the king, by the queen, sorry. But we can always play king h2, and even after that position, so even after king h2, there's still not really an attack that black can do on our king. So he's pretty safe for now. And we'll switch sides to black. So black has three pawns protecting him, and the rook. Yes.
So like, let's say black took their pawn, the queen, they used the queen to take the white pawn,
This one.
and then white king moved up to h2, and then black queen retreated back to h4, and then white king moved back to g1.
Mm-hmm.
Could the queen now, black queen now, from h4 to h1 not be possible?
So it's white to play right now. So I think the first thing that you said was if black takes this pawn right now, but it's white to play. So we would have this extra move first before taking this pawn, pretty much. So we're defending this pawn. So there's no way that black would be able to take this pawn, pretty much, because we have the king here on the next move. Does that make sense? Did that answer your question? Yeah? So let's look at black's king, right? Black has three pawns and this rook defending the king. But as I mentioned before, you got to look for ways that white can sort of feasibly try to attack this king. And there's a tiny little bit of an advantage for white, I think. because actually, if we look at our pieces, we've got this bishop on c4, and we've got this rook on g2 that are basically staring down at this king, right? This bishop is, the bishop's moved diagonally, remember? So it's staring at this king. If this pawn wasn't here, it would be a check, pretty much. It would be attacking the king. And similar with this rook as well, like it moves forwards and up and side to side. It's staring at the king. So there is a potential for an attack later on, but it hasn't manifested itself yet. Even though we have these really strong pieces, the attack's not there yet. But obviously we can bring our pieces to the attack later on, and we can use our advantage, our small advantage. But because we have a feasible attack later on, because we're able to bring all of our pieces to attack the enemy king, then compared to black, who has basically nothing, they have no attack on our king after king h2. So that's why I thought that there could be very small king safety advantage for white. And I thought that it's about plus 0.2 of an advantage for white, just because of these pieces, because obviously they're staring at the king, but they're not really doing much. I suppose they're not actually physically doing an attack right now. They're sort of staring at the king. They're just being menacing, pretty much. But because black's pieces aren't really as menacing compared to ours, that's why I thought that maybe there's a slight advantage for white in terms of king safety. And that's why I had that asterisk over here, because even though both kings are kind of similarly safe, white, I think, has a very small, little bit of an advantage because these two pieces are quite active. Does that make sense? Yeah? A lot of people will probably question where I got this number plus 0.2 from. And actually, a lot of it is very subjective. If I took it to Josh, for example, so he's also another strong player, he probably might have a different opinion of whose king is safer, because at the end of the day, chess is subjective. Like my opinions of a chessboard are going to be completely different to someone else's. So he might think that, oh no, there's probably an even better way of black attacking our pieces. So maybe black has a safer king. But at the end of the day, this is what I thought anyway. This was my thought process, like the very first thing that I thought about when I looked at this position. And you guys are all going to have very different opinions about every single different chess position compared to me, pretty much. Like, that's nature, that's chess. And so this plus 0.2, don't take it as face value, take it with a grain of salt, I'd say, because your opinions about the position may be different to mine. We don't know. But does that make sense? Like, chess is completely subjective, so just because it says plus 0.2 doesn't mean it's completely accurate. Does that make sense? Yeah? So, in terms of material and king safety combined, I've thought that white has the advantage of plus 2 because we have the extra bishop, but black has an extra pawn. But because of this small advantage, I'm going to add this plus 0.2 to our advantage. So we have a plus 2.2 advantage if we're playing as black. At least that's what the criteria says right now. At least that's what I think of the position. But obviously there's 3 more criteria that we still need to go through. And the next one is piece activity. We sort of covered this when we were doing the king safety one. We looked at which of our pieces were active, which of black's pieces are active. But you can answer it again, like, in terms of, like, what is actually piece activity before? Well, basically, piece activity is, like, how active are the pieces? I mean, it says piece activity, so which pieces are active? Which pieces are doing things? Like, which side has... Which pieces are doing other things to your opponent, pretty much. And another thing that I wanted to talk about was future prospects as well. So which pieces can be brought into the game as well that have potential to become even better pieces. So who do you think has better piece activity? Do you think white has better piece activity, or does black have better piece activity? White? How come?
Pawns already developed. You can't really move your rocks much, even if they do get it out. Whereas for white, the pawns are sort of diagonal, so there's more. You can move your rocks and like your queen more. And already like the bishop and the knight is out.
Yeah.
For white.
Exactly. What about for black?
For black, the only active pieces are the queen and the pawn that's pushing there, and maybe the knight if they try to move them.
Okay. You don't like these rooks?
Yeah, the rocks are not doing much.
Yeah. Yeah.
Plus the pawns are not doing much either.
Pretty much. Yeah, that is the correct answer. Anyone else have any opinions? No? That's basically it. Like, that's 100% correct. And I put definitely white, because if you look at what I thought about it, the first thing I said was the c4 bishop and the g2 rook are extremely great. As I mentioned before in the king safety aspect of this lecture, I said that they're targeting the king. They're basically like staring down at the king, saying, "I'm coming to get you," pretty much. So these two pieces are very active. If we look at our queen, for example, it has potential. We can sort of bring it closer to the attack, and same with this knight as well. Maybe we can bring it back to target this pawn over here. Maybe we can bring it forward as well, threatening to play this move f6, which is a really nice move actually. But if we look at our rook as well, this rook on a1 is not doing much. It's very passive. But if we look at black's perspective, as you mentioned as well, like the only pieces that black has that are active are just this queen and maybe this pawn as well. This knight kind of can get into the party. It can go to knight d4, but it's not doing much there anyway. Like, this pawn is defended, so this knight would be attacking this pawn, but it's defended, and it can't really go here as well because we've got a knight there, we've got a rook there as well. And if we look at these two rooks, they're not doing much, right? This rook, even though it's defending these pawns over here, the king is also defending that pawn. And even if the rook did move over here, this is still not a threat for white. And so this rook, and especially this rook on a8, they're doing absolutely nothing on the board. So definitely black has a worse position in this position. So I mentioned black c6 knight, h4 queen. They have potential, and these f8 rooks and a8 rooks are very passive. And I mentioned that white's pieces are significantly more active than black's pieces. And I thought that this was probably about a +1 advantage to white, pretty much. Just because of all of these pieces, they're doing something. They're doing things in the position. They're actively contributing to the position. And these two pieces over here, they have potential. We can bring it into the action. Whereas these pieces, they're not doing much. And it's the same thing again, like I mentioned before, about this evaluation. Again, it's completely subjective, I think. Like, if I spoke to Josh or Nick or whoever it is, or Joel, for example, they would say, they'd have completely different opinions about what the evaluation is. But this is, again, it's my thought process. It's what I think the position is. And again, you guys will probably have different opinions about it. But the first step is thinking, like, I have better piece activity, so I have the advantage. Even if you can't come to, like, a conclusion about what number it is, just knowing that you have better piece activity means that you have some kind of advantage over your opponent. Does that make sense so far? Yeah? Any questions so far?
So do you do the average of all the points at the end?
Yeah. So once we calculate all 5 of them, we sort of take all of them together and we figure out what we think the advantage is for us. We can keep going if there's any more questions, by the way. No questions? Yeah? The next thing, so the fourth thing on the checklist was space advantage. And this actually goes really hand in hand with piece activity. So I mentioned piece activity as well. This goes hand in hand with piece activity. But actually, space advantage is more to do with our pawns as well, rather than our pieces. So if we look at piece activity before, I'm kind of just looking at how well all of our minor pieces and our major piece of the queen can do, whereas space advantage or space advantage, space activity, I guess, space advantage, whatever it is more to do with pawns and pieces combined. It's more to do with like the structure of the position, who has more space, pretty much, who's taking up more space of the board. And if we look at the position again, whose side controls more of the chessboard, or more of the space of the chessboard then? White? Why do you think that? Do they? Do they have more pieces? Which is more important though? Bishop? Yeah. So look at pawns as well. So not just focusing on the pieces. Who has the better pawn structure? Who has the better pawns, pretty much? I guess so, yeah. Any other ideas?
I feel like it's kind of even-ish because they have a queen and our opponent.
Okay. So we'll do a show of hands. Who thinks that black has the space advantage? Nobody? Who thinks white has a space advantage? Everyone, yes. So actually, that is the correct answer. And I thought it was definitely white here. And the reason why I thought that white has the better space advantage is because of these 4 pawns over here. Look how much... So remember, chess is a game of space, pretty much. Whoever has more space in the position is able to coordinate their pieces better. We can reshuffle their pieces, put them on the best possible squares, and go for a big attack, pretty much. Whereas if you're sort of cramped in your position, like black is, I think, in this position, they're quite cramped. They're not very cramped, but they don't have as much space as white, to be honest. And so if you're cramped in your position, like, you can't really maneuver your pieces that much, and you can't get them to the best possible squares, and you can't defend against an attack, pretty much. And so I thought that white had total space domination over black because of what we call this Connect 4. So have you ever played Connect 4 before? Connect 4, yeah? So this kind of looks like a Connect 4 board, pretty much. We have these 4 pawns all connected together, and this is what we call a pawn chain, pretty much. And it's taking up basically all of the center of the board, pretty much. Compared to black's pawns, they're all, except for this one and this one, they're basically all on the home rank, pretty much. They haven't moved at all. They're not taking up as much space as white's pawns are as well. So I'm going to draw again. So we've got all of this space, pretty much. All of these pawns are contributing to all of this space. We've got this queen as well, taking up this entire diagonal. We've got this rook. That was very wibbly line. We've got this rook targeting all of the, taking up all of this space. This bishop over here, taking up all of this space, and this pawn is taking up all of this space as well, and this queen over here. So you can see that black has basically some of this and some squares over here that they can maneuver to, whereas white has basically about 3/4, 2/3 of the board, somewhere in between that. And it's all because of those pawns in the center. So let me get rid of that for a second, because this is quite annoying to look at. But yeah, basically, like, there we go. White has more space, and so they have more space to maneuver their pieces, and black's a lot more restricted compared to white. And space advantage is very important when it comes to chess, because as I mentioned before, chess is a game of space. Whoever has more space is going to win. And so just on space advantage alone, I thought that because we have all of these active pawns in the center, so the Connect 4 pawn structure, compared to black's pawns, basically all on the home squares, I thought that maybe it adds about plus 1.5 to white's advantage. just because we have so much more space compared to black. And again, like I mentioned this twice now, but that number is subjective. You can agree with it, you can disagree with it. It's just important to know that if you know you have a space advantage of your opponent, you got to use it. You have an advantage, so use your advantage pretty much. Does that make sense so far? Yeah? Any questions about that? Anything you want to disagree on as well? You're more than welcome to. Like, that's the beauty of chess. Yeah?
Another way to describe it, just for like introductory purposes,
Mm-hmm.
is like when you tell me sometimes like look to see what squares around your ways that you have the possibility of moving to next.
Yeah.
I think that would be a easy way to describe it.
Okay. Yeah. I agree with that actually. That makes a lot of sense.
Like when you tell me like the queen, or that would be a good example. Like the rook, for
Mm-hmm.
example, if it was here, here this way, that way, like that would be a good. Or I think it's a good equivalent.
Yeah. So I can do that as well actually. Let's look at it here. I have the position up. So we can see that this rook is very active right now. It controls so many squares pretty much.
The computer does a great job.
Yeah, it really does. If we look at this bishop, again, it's staring at the enemy king. It's controlling all of these squares. This knight controls all of these squares over here. This square is not it's not a great square to go back to because it's the home square, but we want to bring it forwards. We want to bring it into the game. Again, this rook is not doing much compared to this rook. Notice it can only go 2 squares. And this knight over here, again, it has potential, pretty much, as I mentioned.
And then like what a good valuation for this third criteria would be like how many dots each side has.
I guess so, yeah. So I wouldn't say it's just about how many dots or how many squares it can go to, but how many important squares can it go to. So think about the prophylaxis lesson that I talked about last week. How many squares does it control that black or white or whoever your opponent is wants to go to? If you can control as many squares as your opponent, or more squares than your opponent, then you're doing a pretty good job. And again, the number doesn't really matter as much, but it's just a way of quantifying it, pretty much. We can go back to this. Any more questions, by the way? Yeah?
I think black could slightly be better off, because if you move the knight to e5, and then you push the pawn to f3,
Yep.
then you're forcing the queen to take it. But if the queen doesn't take it, you take their rook.
I guess so, yeah. So,
And even if you take it with a check.
yeah. So just to show you that just for the people on the recording. Yeah. So let's say if white plays like a really passive move, like it does nothing. It brings the what's it called? The move to black. A waiting move. Yeah, that's the word. Thank you. White can play this move. Black can play this move knight e5, and they're threatening this move f3 pretty much. Targeting the rook, and the rook would have to move away. So what we mentioned last week was prophylaxis. So this pawn, if it moves here, yeah, it targets this rook. So prophylactic chess, we know that black wants to go here. How do we stop them from going there? Or how do we take the sting out of it as well?
I think I'd just start attacking with the knight. But then, even then, to be fair, you could attack the knight with the pawn. So even if it pushes the pawn over there,
this pawn?
you can just move the rook away.
This pawn? You'd push this pawn?
Maybe?
What's this defending right now?
Oh, no, it's defending the bishop. Why the bishop's on?
So if I move this here, the bishop's gone, yeah.
Would you either
Move the rook up?
yeah, either move the rook or move the queen into a position where
So where would you move the rook, sorry? Anywhere.
To g4.
G4?
No, but that's
Knight takes, yeah.
oh what? Maybe d2?
D2? What was so good about this rook on this square? Attacking the king, yeah. So are we? So as I mentioned before, in the prophylactic chess, I mentioned that you can either, there's two types of prophylactic chess. Basically, is preventing the move altogether, or letting the opponent play the move, but taking the sting out of it, pretty much. And so black wants to go here. We can just play this move, rook f2, and it doesn't attack this rook anymore, and we can sort of just carry on with our lives, I guess. Even though this pawn does hang, like, we can take this afterwards.
Because even if we move the rook away, it will take the pawn.
If we play this, it takes the pawn, but we take this pawn. So it's, again, as I mentioned, like, black wants to play this move, but we can't really stop it. I mean, we can play queen here, but we just lose the knight. We lose the queen.
No, but then once the rook takes from there, you can just move the knight and check the king.
So rook here,
Right.
pawn here. You wanted that?
No, this is if the queen takes the pawn
If
first.
the queen takes the pawn,
The move order is changed now.
Also,
yeah, if the queen
This.
takes the pawn, the rook takes that pawn,
yep.
then move the knight to check the king.
I still take this though, and it's still hanging.
What about
We can look at this afterwards. We need to carry on with the lesson, but I can show you at this afterwards. It's very interesting. But we're nearly done. So I mentioned before, like, I thought that just because white has a better space advantage over black, I thought that it equates to roughly about a plus 1.5 advantage over black. And actually the final thing that we can talk about in terms of the 5 things we need to look at in, I forgot what the word was. The evaluation, pretty much, yeah. The checklist, thank you, was tactics. The final bit was tactics. And basically, I talked about tactics in one of the lectures in semester 1. And basically, tactics are like really nice moves that force the opponent to do something, pretty much. And examples are forks, we've got pins, skewers, and discovered attacks. So, like you can look at the, I can tell you about it afterwards if you're a bit confused. But for the people that did come to this lecture, I know you definitely did. I remember you came there. But are there any tactics that white or black can do in this position? Yep. Is there any way we can take advantage of that by any chance? No? No, actually there isn't. So even though that this pawn over here on f7 is pinned, we can't really take advantage of it. You know, we can't play, queen h5 attacking the pawn, because obviously the black king would just take the white queen would take, the black queen would take the white queen. I can get my words. There we go. And so actually, if you think about it, there's no tactics on the board. There's nothing very nothing out of the blue, like no wild moves, no tactics that we can do in this position. So if there was a tactic, we'd have to look for it, and if there was a really nice tactic for white or for black, that would gain an advantage or a disadvantage for whoever is on the receiving end of the tactic. And so when we collate it all together, so all the 5 points of the evaluation, of the checklist evaluation, I thought that it was +2 to white because they had an extra bishop but lost a pawn for that. I thought king safety, there was plus 0.2 for white. For piece activity, I thought +1, just because of these two pieces over here, so this c4 bishop and this rook on g2, compared to black's pieces not being great. I thought space advantage was significantly better for white, just because of this connect 4 chain, we have in the center, so we have so much more space. And actually, I didn't think there was any tactics. Like, I've looked at his position for a while now. I can't really see much. Maybe there's knight d5 and f6 ideas, but it's not really a tactic. It's just an attack, pretty much. And so if we add it all together, it comes to plus 4.7. And so, I as I mentioned before, I haven't actually looked at what it is. I've only sort of just looked at the position as well on its own. So I'm as surprised as you are. Like, if this is like a crazy evaluation, then so it'll come up on here or down here. What do you guys think it will be, first of all? So I've got plus 4.7. What do you guys think it might be? 4.8? 4.6, okay. Charlie? Round 4, okay. Esther? 4.5. 3.5?
Maybe we'll be on the dot.
On the dot, okay. And? 4.5, all right. Drum roll, please. It is plus 4.2. Wow. That's actually really accurate. Wow. That's crazy. So plus 4.2, who was closest? You said 4? You said 4.5. Well done. Very nice. So it was plus 4.2 for white. Yeah, I what did I say? I said 4.7. So plus 0.5 off, which is not bad. Like,
Can we see on the engine which parts we overestimated?
I don't have chess.com premium, so it doesn't allow me. If I put this on the
Bill it to the Chess Society or something.
no, unfortunately, it's really expensive, to be honest.
How much is it?
It's like £50 it's per month, isn't it, as well? Yeah, which is yeah. That's why I use Lee Chess anyway. You get free analysis for that.
Did the society get like credit from the school?
Yeah, from like memberships and grants and stuff like that. Yeah, but anyway, like that was a pretty good evaluation. And so I've got like a couple of examples that I wanted to go through with you guys, but it's already 6:50, so and you guys still haven't played anything, so I suppose yeah, I'm gonna do that as well. Like, if you want, you can like look through these as well in your own time.
Can we have a question from Esther, like two rules for peace activity or space activity?
Yeah, actually, we can do that as well. So you know that you know the thing where like you bring the knight to e5.
Oh, right.
So bringing it here and then playing this f3 move.
She wanted me to predict, like, do the points thing. I was like, no, I can't do that.
Oh, okay.
Activity or was it space activity?
Peace activity, maybe. I think so.
Can we play at the same time when you start?
Probably. Why not?
Sorry, what'd you say?
Can we stop playing this one?
Yeah. Hold on. So I did have these like 3 examples, but we don't have time for it. It's already 6:50. But it is your turn now. Basically, I want you guys to play against each other, and once you reach the middle game, after like every couple of moves or so, go through the checklist with yourself and with your opponent as well, and basically try to figure out what you think the evaluation is. And if you think you have an advantage, try and figure out how you can use it better, pretty much. And so if you've got any questions during the session, please do ask. But anyway, thank you guys for coming. Yeah, bye YouTube. Thank you for coming. Thank you for watching. If you watch this far, like, what are you doing with your life? You shouldn't be watching, but thank you anyway.
Who tied this? Why is it 200?